Story 1. I was a high school senior, and this unsettling event occurred during a late autumn football game. My friend Jim and I invited Kayla and Ashley, two girls who were our crushes, and we snuck alcohol into the game. We arrived at the football field, parking in the back lot, close to the woods. Our football team lost the match that day. We, however, were determined to make the most of the evening, planning to hang out on the field after the game. It was around 10 o'clock by then, and with Jim's return, a playful idea took hold. "Let's explore those woods next to the football field," he suggested, knowing it would be an adventure. The girls were curious but also nervous. They agreed to follow, but only if we stayed together. We assured them that we would. We climbed over a low section of the fence, often used as a shortcut into the woods, then walked down the small hill into the dark and peaceful forest. We heard a strange noise as we went deeper into the woods. It sounded like someone was humming a tune. We stopped and listened, trying to locate the source of the sound. It seemed to come from behind a large tree about 20 feet away from us. We decided to investigate, and we saw something that made us freeze. It was a woman sitting on a log. She looked like she was in her 40s. She looked normal enough, except for one thing: she had no eyes. There were only empty sockets covered with bloody bandages. She did not seem to notice us, as she continued humming her tune like she was very happy. We stood in shock, staring at the woman, not knowing what to do or say. She suddenly stopped humming and tilted her head toward us. She smiled and said in a cheerful voice, "Hello there, kids. What brings you here?" We turned and ran, screaming for the girls to follow. We ran back to the fence, hoping to get away from the woman. But as we reached the opening, we saw that it was locked by a chain and padlock. Someone had locked us in the woods. We heard the woman's laughter behind us and her footsteps getting closer. She said, "You can't escape. You're mine now. You'll be my new eyes." We panicked and tried to find another way out, but the woods were too thick and tangled. We were trapped. She grabbed us by the hair and pulled us towards her face. She said, "Let me see you." And then she dug her fingers into our eyes. I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines and wires. Jim was lying next to me, hooked up to similar devices. Kayla and Ashley were sitting by our side, crying. We were found by a security guard, who called the police and rescued us. They said that we had been attacked by a woman who had escaped from a mental hospital. She had lost her eyes in a fire that had killed her family, and she had gone insane. Everyone said that we were lucky to be alive, but that we would never see again. I thanked them for their concern, but I knew they were wrong. I was not lucky. I was cursed. I could still hear the woman's voice in my head and feel her touch on my face. Story 2. I was a new student at my high school. It was tough not knowing anyone. Everyone had already formed their cliques. Juniors couldn't leave school for lunch, so I had to eat in the cafeteria, dreading the prospect of sitting alone. When lunchtime came, I walked into the cafeteria looking for an empty spot. Every table was taken, and I didn't want to intrude on a random group. In the corner, though, I spotted a table with only 2 kids. It seemed like the least intimidating option, so I approached and asked if I could sit there. They hesitated but agreed. Sitting down, I realized the 2 were identical twins, Antonio and Bruno. They seemed okay, and they even invited me to join their club after school. They said it was a secret society of people who could see ghosts. I thought they were joking, but I played along. I needed to make friends. We exchanged numbers, and Bruno texted me to meet them at a nearby cemetery around 9 that night. He said it was their headquarters and that they had something important to show me. It was just a 10-minute walk from my house, and I agreed. As the evening came, Bruno texted me again to confirm, and I set off to meet them on the road by the cemetery. The further I walked, the more I thought about being the new kid and the weird idea of going to a cemetery at night with kids I barely knew. Once I reached the road near the cemetery, I called for Bruno and Antonio. They replied that they were in the woods by a small lake where they had found a haunted tombstone. They wanted me to see it for myself. I followed their directions, pushing through branches with my phone flashlight as my only source of light. I called for them as I neared their location, but then I heard whispers, eerie and low. Scared, I decided it was a prank and started walking back to the road, but the whispers, once low, turned into screams, and before I could react, someone had their hands around my neck, squeezing me. I heard one of the twins shouting, "He's here! He's here!" I managed to break free, running toward the road, with them following me to the tree line. I ran all the way home and told my parents, who called the police right away. They arrived at the scene and found the twins lying on the ground, unconscious and bleeding from their ears. They said they had been attacked by a ghost that only they could see. The police checked their phones and found the text messages they had sent me, inviting me to their trap. They were taken to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. About a week later, one night, I woke up to a cold breeze and found my window open. I checked below my window, and someone could have accessed it from a ledge on the exterior. I went to my parents' room, and my mom denied opening the window. She was as alarmed as I was. My dad told me to stay with them and went to check my room. We called the police again, and they told us that the twins had escaped from the hospital that night. They said they were dangerous and delusional and that we should be careful. They advised us to lock our doors and consider moving out of town. Though I never saw those twins again, nothing of the sort happened again after a few fearful months. Looking back, I realized I should have been more cautious and stayed away from those kids I met in the cafeteria. Story 3. During my freshman year of high school back in 2007, a thunderstorm raged outside as our gym class neared its end. A substitute teacher, an older man with a shock of gray hair, took charge that day. I remember his piercing gaze when he took attendance, which sent a chill down my spine. He divided us into volleyball teams and then vanished into the hallway near the locker rooms. As the minutes ticked by, the storm raged on, making the atmosphere even more eerie. Finally, the bell rang and the period was over. I made my way to the locker room, but my locker seemed to defy my efforts. No matter how many times I tried my combination, it refused to open. I assumed it was a momentary lapse in memory, but as time passed, it became clear something sinister was afoot. The substitute teacher reassured me that he'd retrieved the list of locker combinations. I waited outside his office, feeling a sense of unease. He reemerged with a book, and I couldn't help but notice it was open to a specific page. To my surprise, he accompanied me into the girls' locker room. Only one girl remained, finishing up changing. We approached my stubborn locker, and he tried the combination listed on the paper. It failed repeatedly, and with each failure, he would turn to me with a peculiar laugh. I nervously chuckled along. As the situation grew increasingly unsettling, he placed his hand on my shoulder and assured me, "We'll figure this out." His hand began to slide slowly down from my shoulder to my lower back. I pushed him away, grabbed my bag, and claimed I was running late for my bus. He made one last futile attempt at the combination, and the locker finally sprang open. He smiled and walked away. I waited for the locker room door to click shut before resuming my change. As I was changing, the room plunged into darkness. Hastily pulling on my pants, I fumbled for my backpack and made my way toward the back exit. As I reached the intersection of two rows of lockers, I glanced right to check for any signs of him. The faint light from a rectangular window overhead illuminated his face, peeking from around the corner of the lockers. Without hesitation, I sprinted for the exit door, the substitute teacher chasing after me, imploring me to wait and claiming it wasn't what it seemed. I burst out into the rain and left the high school campus behind. The walk home through the pouring rain allowed me time to reflect on what had happened. It dawned on me that he had somehow altered my locker combination, scheming to be alone with me in the locker room. What his sinister intentions might have been, I dared not imagine. Despite the trauma and fear, I couldn't bring myself to confide in anyone, not my parents or friends. This dark secret remained locked away in my heart, a terrifying encounter that still haunts my memories to this day.